Today I want to talk a little bit about the present moment, about a meditation in the present moment. And this is a practice that you may have heard of, that you may have come across from time to time when discussing meditation or when being taught meditation. So in today's video, what I want to do is to discuss a bit of that history of the idea of meditation in the present moment, as well as look at some early suttas from the Buddhist tradition about that very topic. If you're new to this channel and interested in living a wiser and a kinder and a calmer life, consider subscribing to this channel and click the bell down below if you want to receive notifications when I come out with new videos. So when we talk about living a calmer life, I think part of that, or part of the strategy, part of the technique we can use to calm ourselves is precisely this, to practice a present moment-centered type of meditation. Now, some of you will be familiar with this idea. It plays a large role, for example, in what's known as MBSR meditation, or mindfulness-based stress reduction meditation, where the idea is to essentially focus ourselves in the present, to leave past and future aside, and simply stay with the way things are right now. And perhaps the earliest source of this kind of practice is in early Buddhism. And there's a paper out by Anālayo, Bhikkhu Anālayo, who is a very good scholar, great scholar of the early tradition, who argues just this, that we can find origins of this kind of present moment focus in early Buddhist practice. And so I'm going to be looking at some of what Anālayo says in that paper, as well as I say, getting at some other suttas that Anālayo doesn't mention, but that also are in the early tradition that mention a similar kind of mindset. Now, I really can't go on without mentioning at least another thinker, a man named Eckhart Tolle, who has a book out called The Power of Now, I believe it's called. It's not a book that I have read. I've looked at it. I have a copy of it somewhere that was given to me. But my understanding is that he argues very much as the same kind of thing. That is, that by focusing on the present moment, we can find a calmer kind of lifestyle, as well as being a freer and more open kind of lifestyle simply by focusing on the present. That is, that a focus in the present moment can be deeply liberating and empowering in certain ways. Now, Anālayo argues, as I say, that this focus on the present can be found in early Buddhist practice, in particular in a sutta called the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, or it's perhaps the more accurate translation would be the Four Establishments of Mindfulness, but it basically comes to the same thing. The point is that these are four different types of practices that we use to center ourselves, to become more mindful. And Anālayo argues that in that text we find this present focus of our practice. Now, I did an earlier video on the history of mindfulness practice, and I'll leave a link to that video down below in case you want to know more about its history. But in this video, what I'm going to be discussing is the sort of the present focus of that practice. Now, it's important, before I get to that present focus, to keep in mind or to realize that not everything in these four foundations of mindfulness is present focused. Some of the practices that are mentioned in that text involve recalling the past, involve a kind of an active contemplation of potential futures for ourselves. So it's not exclusively a text about the present moment. However, its most important parts, I think, or some of its most important parts are. Now, this text on the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, or Four Establishments, is a long text, so I'm not going to be able to look at every aspect of it here, but I'm going to give a general overview of what it says and how it's important to our practice here. It begins with this idea that we should pay attention to the nature of our breaths, to how we're breathing, as well as to the nature of our posture. Are we sitting? Are we standing? Are we lying down? And these practices, these two different practices that we find at the beginning of that text, are, again, present moment focused. That is to say, we're not trying to remember how we used to breathe in the past or how we may have been standing or sitting in the past, and we're not trying to focus on the future. We're not trying to find a different way of breathing, sort of aim towards some different way of breathing or aim towards some different way of orienting our body. Rather, it's supposed to be that we're focused right here and right now on the fact that let's say our breath is a short breath, is a short breath in, then a short breath out, a long breath in, then a long breath out, that kind of thing. We're focused right here and right now. This is supposed to take our minds out of our general tendency to ruminate about other things and simply focus on the way things are happening right here. Another practice is to pay attention to painful or pleasant feelings in the body or in the mind, but it's right here and right now. So we're not speculating or worrying about the future or hankering towards the past or some potential future. Instead, we are focused on the way things feel right now. Another practice that comes later on in the sutta has to do with paying attention to the character of our minds. Are we getting needy? Are we getting annoyed about something? Are we getting angry? Now, the important thing with this practice to keep in mind is that we don't want to get lost in the stories here. In other words, we may be getting angry about something that happened to us in the past, but the point of the practice is not to fall into the past and not to start ruminating about what happened to us yesterday and all that. Instead, we're supposed to focus on the character of our mind right now. How is it right now? How does it feel right now? The same way about hankering or wishing for or enjoying something that might happen to us in the future. We're not supposed to get lost in that story of what might be happening to us tomorrow. Instead, we're supposed to focus on the character of our minds as we're sitting in meditation. However, while the four foundations or four establishments of mindfulness are a critical place to look for this present focus within early Buddhism, there are a number of other texts that say something similar, or even that express it in a more direct fashion, that say specifically that the point is to focus on the present. And in particular, there's a group of suttas all oriented around a poem that the Buddha apparently gave called One Fine Night or One Auspicious Night. And in this poem centers around the very topic of present focus, that we should be focused on this moment right here and right now. And so this poem that the Buddha gives goes like this. He says, "Don't run back to the past. Don't hope for the future. What's past is left behind. The future has not arrived, and phenomena in the present are clearly seen in every case. Knowing this, foster it, unfaltering, unshakable. The peaceful sage explained, it's those who keenly meditate like this, tireless all night and day, who truly have that one fine night." Now, this poem is repeated in various different suttas, and each one has a different protagonist. That is to say, a different person who is discussing the sutta and reflecting upon it, or at least discussing it. And this suggests that this poem of the Buddha's was of real importance back in the days of early Buddhism as a sort of a subject of practice, as a subject of contemplation. And in one of these suttas, a monk named Mahakachana gives his own sort of exegesis of this poem. In other words, he describes what he thinks it means. And this is the one place where it's really described in some detail, where Mahakachana sort of goes through it and tries to explain it. And so he goes through it part by part. In particular, he asks, what does it mean to run back to the past? And here Mahakachana says that that's to have a kind of a yearning for stuff that happened to us in the past. Beautiful sights and sounds, beautiful things we ate or liquid that we drank, great experiences that we had, the kind of memory that comes back into our minds that makes us yearn for them again. This running back into the past, this kind of living in our own past, which for the Buddha, for Mahakaccana, is not really a very healthy or positive way to live, this kind of yearning for things that have gone. And secondly, what is it to hope for the future? Here, Mahakaccana says, the heart is set on getting what it does not have, thinking, may I have such eyes and such sights in the future, such ears and such sounds, such as nose and such smells, and so on. That is, even if we don't recall such experiences in our own past, we may want them for ourselves in the future. Indeed, we may want an experience simply because we've never had it. Some place we've never been, some food we've never eaten, some sight we've never seen. Although nowadays with photos and the videos and movies and the internet, we can see pretty much all we want, but we're not seeing it in person, which really seems to matter for many of us. So it's this idea, I should say it's not only the sights and sounds and so on, but it's also, Mahakaccana says, our own sense faculties as well that we may wish for. In other words, we may get to a certain age where we may wish for better eyes, to see better the way we used to in our youth. Fortunately, nowadays we have glasses. In the Buddha's day, they wouldn't have. Or better ears. We may be losing our hearing. Again, nowadays we have hearing aids, but they're not perfect, and in the Buddha's day, certainly that was not an option. And there are various ways that we can lose our ability to experience things through our senses the way we used to when we were younger, or the way other people do. Perhaps we ourselves are blind or deaf, or hard of hearing in some way, or are colorblind or something, and we may hanker after the way somebody else is experiencing the world. And this, in the same way, and this comes under Mahakaccana's idea of sort of this hankering towards the future, this unhealthy kind of way that we get ourselves out of the present moment and wish for things that are not here. And in order to avoid these kind of hankerings and wishings and desires, it's best for us to stay seeing what's right here and right now in the present. However, Mahakaccana also goes on to say that we can falter with respect to the present moment as well. That is to say, that when we say that we should remain in the present, in fact, that's what we've been saying all throughout this video until now, is, this focus on the present moment. Well, we have to be careful with that, because even simply a focus on the present moment can bring its own dangers. And so what are these dangers? What is this potential for failing with regard to the present moment? Well, Mahakaccana says that to falter with regard to the present is to cling to present states as things that we want to remain. So we may be sitting in a present moment that's very pleasurable, that's the sort of thing we like a lot. And as a result, we want it to stay. We don't want it to leave. That is a kind of danger in the present moment. And this is expressed in one place, perhaps most famously, in one of the most famous early Buddhist texts, the Dhammapada. Let go of the past, let go of the future, let go of the present. Gone beyond becoming, with the mind released in every way, you do not again undergo birth and old age. So again, we have to let go of the present, just as much as the other two time periods. And in a very early text, perhaps one of the earliest texts in the Buddhist tradition, a text called the Atthakavagga, which is part of the Sutta Nipata, which is a collection of early texts, we also read this: dry up what pertains to the past. Let there be nothing afterward. If you do not grasp in the middle, you will live in peace. So do not grasp in the middle. That is to say, the present moment is not intended to be a place of refuge, of perfect refuge, where we stay and cling to that present as in the belief that somehow we're going to be safe right here. That's not the proper approach. Rather, we have to understand that the present is itself also something that we have to practice with. The present is indeed our arena of practice. That's what's important about it. That's why it's something that we should focus on. We cannot practice in the past. The past is already gone. And indeed, our ideas about the past are going to be distorted by our own memory, which is faulty. We oftentimes remember things that didn't actually happen, or remember them, let's say, incorrectly. And similarly, we can't practice in the future. The future hasn't come yet. And also, in the very same way that we are not accurate about the past, we know that most of the things we worry about in the future are not going to come to pass. We worry about all kinds of things in the future, again, and most of our worries are the sorts of things that are themselves the problem. That is to say, the worry is itself the problem, not the future, not what actually comes to pass. We often get the future wrong. Indeed, we almost always get the future wrong. So we stay in the present for many reasons, partly because it's our arena of practice, partly because it's, as long as we stick with the way things are seeming to us right now, there's less opportunity for our own delusions, which is not to say that delusion doesn't happen in the present as well. Of course it does, but the delusion is somewhat thinner and easier to see through with enough practice. So it's not as though the present is the only real thing or something like that, or something that we can really cling to, some solid thing that we can cling to. Rather, it's something that has to be let go of as well. The reason we focus on it is because it's the most direct thing that we have. It's something that we can really practice with. Now, I think it would be important at this point, I think, to look at and get to know the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which is the aim, or I should say the background of a lot of this practice. And I did an earlier series of videos on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and I'll leave a link to the playlist of those videos up here on the screen in case you haven't seen them. If you're getting something out of these videos of mine, please consider taking a look over my Patreon page and seeing if you want to help support the channel and get something in return for that. Thanks so much, and we'll catch you on the next video, and meanwhile, all of you, be well.